When I was Chancellor of Portsmouth University, at the parting speech, I always used to make the kids say, out loud, I am happy now. And I said, that's got to be your motto for the rest of your life. Every now and then, mark a moment of happiness so that you don't miss it.
Hello, I'm Catherine Fairweather, and welcome back to the next mini-series of the third act. And 6 inspiring guests every fortnight, including the inimitable Bill Nighy, fashion photographer Bruce Weber, and former supermodel turned novelist Penelope Tree. In today's episode, I'm delighted to introduce the inspirational, award-winning actor and author Dame Sheila Hancock, still fully active and working at nearly 92. In this episode, we explore the meaning of her innate restlessness and the experiences of a wartime childhood, which fueled an incredibly driven social conscience. We also discuss the beauty of Quakerism, moments of epiphany and joy, and how death, the last taboo, is perhaps only the next adventure. Dame Sheila Hancock, I'm particularly thrilled that you're here because I've been trying to get you onto the third act for about, months and maybe even years. And finally you've agreed, which is...
I don't think I was saying, no, I won't do it. I think I probably was saying, look, I'm awfully busy. You
have been very busy with this latest book, Old Rage.
Yeah.
But I'm entertained that you're the first one of my guests, and if you don't mind me saying, you're the most senior of my guests, who has insisted on driving herself here in your 10th decade. That says quite a lot about your independent state of mind.
Yes, I like having my wheels. I really do. In fact, people say, oh, they shouldn't have old people on the road, but I did a test. Years ago, I passed the advanced driving test, and I thought I'd do a bit of a refresher just to check I'm still all right. And I did it, and they said, you're fantastic. You're a really excellent driver. So, I am safe. I love driving. I love being in my car with music playing. I love looking at the scenery.
Yes, I was thinking how much I love driving yesterday when I was driving in Greece, listening to Old Rage on audio, which is such a pleasure to listen to your voice. I was so hooked into the story that I missed my ring road to the airport.
Oh, no.
I ended up in the centre of Thessaloniki, about to run out of petrol, and within inches of missing my flight. So
I'm really sorry. I do apologise.
Yeah, it was so pleasurable actually listening on Audible. To, I think I was expecting a sort of lovey memoirs, but it isn't at all.
Yes, I think the title has been a bit misleading, Old Rage, because it just seems a funny idea. But I am quite angry, but there's not so much of it in the book, and I hope there's a bit of joy as well.
Well, there's a lot of joy, a lot of laughter, I cried a lot as well. I thought it was incredibly moving. And you seem to sort of land ideas that you plonked on my lap. For me, personally, I want to bring up in this podcast.
Oh, right. Great.
But anyway, it's certainly not a memoir about sort of tottering gently into the good night, is it?
No, it isn't.
And I don't think you're tottering gently into any good night.
No, I'm not. I'm not as active as I was. I have to pace myself. But I work hard. I go to the gym and I make sure I walk. Because there's no doubt that as you get older, if you stop using your body seizes up. It's a damned hard struggle to keep it. It doesn't want to move. It would much prefer to sit in the armchair and watch the telly. And then if I do that, when I do get up, if I watch the telly for an hour and I stand up, I feel awful. I'm aching all over.
I know one isn't meant to comment on the way people look anymore. I know it's not cool, but you're 91. You look unbelievable.
Oh.
And you speak like a young person. You move like a young person, and I don't know. Is there a history of longevity in your family?
No, there's not. But then I think my parents died early because they had such hard lives.
Yeah,
they both died around 70, I think. One of my grannies lived to 80, which was remarkable in those days. I was talking to somebody the other day who's also old like me and active. And I said, I wonder if wartime rationing was a good thing.
No sugar, it's good.
Yeah, we had these frugal diets and ate loads of vegetables because you could grow them. But we didn't have meat very much, a tiny bit of fat. So we had those basics. And I think that probably was good rather than all the awful temptations that youngsters have now of crisps and sweets and all those things.
Absolutely, I think
we didn't have any. The sweets were rationing. You queued for a crunchy bar.
You could get crunchy bars, couldn't you?
Well, you could, but they were very rare. And if a shop had them, you went and queued. Because everybody, there's a crunchy bars at so-and-so shop, and off you'd go.
I was talking to my husband about his idea of luxury, and he was born in the same area of London as you were, Charing Cross.
Oh, right.
And a couple of years difference in your ages, and he was saying, just, I think as you have said in your book, that for him the ultimate luxury from a childhood of war deprivation is wonderful sheets and wonderful soap. And you were saying that in your
Yes,
book.
I have silk sheets. Silk sheets, yes. One slept in bunks, and when I was evacuated, I slept on a sort of leatherette sofa in this ghastly place. So, sleeping wasn't a pleasure in those days. But now, yes, I do have a beautiful bed and beautiful sheets.
What other luxuries do you rate?
Well, they're mainly things to do, sitting and listening to music or sitting and reading a book gives me terrible guilt. For somehow I have this feeling that I should be doing things all the time. My mother was the same. My mother never sat still. And when she did, she was knitting or darning or doing something. Do you know what I mean? And I'm a bit like that. So I think luxury for me is to enjoy myself. And I'm so glad that all my daughters and my grandchildren do enjoy themselves. I've always felt guilty about that. I didn't think I should go out. I thought I should be working.
Really?
Yeah.
And now you will go out to a restaurant or go to a play and
go to a concert. I don't enjoy going to plays because they either make me very angry because they're not very good, or they make me very jealous because I'm not doing it. So it's not a good. I used to go with Geraldine McEwen, who's since died, bless her, and in the interval we were both trying to invent what we were going to say when we went backstage if we hated it. We'd say, well, you can do the scenery and I'll talk about the costumes and anything, rather than say this is a load of rubbish and why are you doing it.
Well, harsh critics, it's quite good to have the hostile reader as well.
Yes.
So writing, I've always thought writing was an indulgence for me personally.
Right.
I would love to spend time writing. But you're so good at writing, you obviously, that is work for you, is it?
I'm doing more of that now. Yes, it is work, because, for instance, I write a regular column for a magazine, Prospect, so I have to deliver on time. And I put it off, and then the only way I find, and I give this recommendation to anybody who can't get started, have a pad and a pen by your bed, and the minute you wake up, start writing. Anything, just start writing.
Yes.
And then go and have a cup of tea. If you do anything first, you'll find other things to do, and you'll postpone. Do you know what I mean? So I do that. I force myself. And 9 times out of 10, something happens.
So you're a journaler, aren't you?
Yes, I suppose so. I've written one novel, which was very poor, I think, although people seem to have liked it. It's called Miss Carter's War, and it was about a teacher. I'd love to have another go. They do want me to write another novel, but I don't think I'll finish it before I die. When you get to my age, you do have to think, well, could only be 2 years. And then you have the D-Day celebrations and you've got old boys of 103 still tottering up to the microphone. So
yeah. I mean, since your husband died, I think you started writing in your 70s, didn't you?
Yes, I did, yes.
And do you find writing more rewarding than acting? Different?
Yes, I think I do. I find I care hugely about what's going on in the world. I am deeply committed to trying to make the world a better place. That sounds idealistic, but it's just my passion. My dad taught me that you've got to change the world. And with writing, I can do that more often than I can with acting. And I think there's desperate unrest and desperate lack of, I don't know, any kind of vision from anyone, it seems to me.
But as we were saying earlier, before we sat down here, actually, you were saying that, however, there's this sort of bubbling, percolating discontent is coming up from grassroots level.
I think people are beginning to make their voices heard. I think they've had enough. Like the post office scandal, that was the ordinary people that brought that, or wouldn't let it go. The same with Grenville. They've been fighting to get it through that there are people who should be prosecuted. They haven't yet, but I don't think those people will give up. All these things where the little people, as Farage likes to call them, the little people have been shat on. And suddenly they're saying, no, wait a minute. This has got to stop. Somehow this has to stop. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have lived through that period after the war when we got a, dare I say, left-wing government in. And I come from a pretty poor working-class background. My life was transformed by a visionary government. The national health, education, all those things were suddenly for me, not for the privileged. And it was, and I feel the whole country came together to change things. Now, after COVID, I've been hoping that would happen to us because people discovered that they liked not having to go to work every day. They preferred working at home and spending more time with their friends and family and nature. But we've gone back to the hating immigrants and hating everybody.
So some things have changed. I mean, the seismic shifts, the Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement, not defining people by their gender. There is more fluidity.
But the opposition to those things is still vicious.
Vicious, but the cracks are appearing.
I think that's where the youngsters are. Yeah. I think that's where my grandchildren are. Yeah. They've got their websites that they get their news from, which is nothing to do with what the adults are looking at. And they are disillusioned by politics. In my day, you engaged with politics when you were young. Now they engage with causes.
Yes.
And certainly the climate is one of them.
Absolutely.
But they're also finding it tough. The fact that they're having to live with their parents. And I think that's very difficult. I mean, I had to earn a living from when I was 16.
You were out, you went to Paris.
Yes, I went. Actually, funnily enough, the D-Day thing happening is curious. I hitchhiked around Europe 2 years after the war, and I went to the places where the fellas landed. And in those days, if you had a Union Jack on your knapsack, you were welcome with open arms. Now, people avoid the English because they're drunken louts mainly.
But who gave you, where did you get? Was it a school teacher or were you inspired? Did your parents encourage you to?
No,
you don't exactly.
No, they were very frightened, I remember. I've got a little diary that I wrote where I'm sending messages to my dad constantly that I'm all right. I don't know how they let me go because it was very risky. I was hitchhiking. I didn't, and I was living in hostels or living in haystacks a lot.
I'm intrigued by this person that you say you went to grammar school, you've got a scholarship. You were already climbing the rungs of the ladder to improve your beginnings, weren't you?
I had a very ambitious dad. My dad wanted me to do well, and I wanted to do well to please him. I worshipped him.
Did you?
He was a good man. And I got a scholarship because in those days you had to pay to go to grammar school. The Education Act came in again with that government, and then anybody could afford to go to those schools. I worked terribly hard, and I was quite clever. And the teachers very sweetly wanted me to go to university, but I didn't even know what university was, and neither did my dad, really. And the only people I knew that had gone to university were my teachers, certainly none of our friends or acquaintances or anybody. I didn't know what it was. Seriously, I didn't. We didn't have telly, so I didn't even see what Cambridge and Oxford were like in all the lovely series that we had later. So I said, no, I don't want to do any more schools. And they thought I could get something called a state scholarship that they had at that time. But I turned it down. And my parents, bless them, didn't know enough about it to realise that they should have forced me to do that.
Did you think later in life that you could have done a post?
Oh, I'd love to have gone. When I look back, Oh, it's such a disadvantage not having done
Do you think?
that.
Yeah.
Yes, I think, because I think I've only started doing writing and things in my 70s and 60s because I didn't think people like me did. But if you go to university, then you know you can do anything. That's what you do. And you're taught to do things on your own.
Yes, but look at you. You became an actress, and think of all the material you've read and all the life experience.
I haven't.
All
I did
Shakespeare's
loads of
plays.
My career has been an awful lot of rubbish. I've had to earn a living always, and I haven't done an elegant career by any manner of means. It amazes me that anybody thinks that I have, because I haven't. I was the first director in the Olivier Theatre. That was good, and I was artistic director of the Royal Shakespeare tour, but that was only because the boys wouldn't do it, because the tour was considered a very boring thing to do. And I had this amazing company, wonderful, talented people, Dan Day-Lewis and Penny Downey and Amanda Root. I chose them. They were hand-picked before they were all super famous. And we were utterly dedicated to taking Shakespeare. We went to Belfast during the Troubles. We had to be guarded by people with guns, and it was the best experience of my life. That was a high point for me, because that was my social responsibility.
Yes.
I was doing what my dad said I should do.
Yes.
And using my talent to do that.
Yeah,
So
that must have been so deeply satisfying, the coming together of your talent and your social conscience.
Absolutely. And I like actors. They're usually pretty committed people. They're not lovies at all.
Yeah, and also to be an actor, you have to be a storyteller, and you're a storyteller in both ways. You're a writing storyteller and an acting storyteller. And what else do you think you need to be a good actor? Why are you attracted to actors? What else? What other qualities do you think?
Well, you have to be very well educated now. You have to, you know, I always say that to youngsters. Say, I want to go on the stage. I say, well, go to university and become an educated person, because you're going to have to be. Because the sort of directors you'll be working with will expect you to have researched, know how to research, know a lot about iambic pentameter and all that sort of stuff for Shakespeare. So, on the whole, actors are pretty well educated, either self-educated, like Kenneth Williams was, incredibly knowledgeable Kenneth. And I think he left school when he was about 2. I mean, he just didn't have a proper education, but he knew everything. And he never stopped reading and learning.
Curiosity.
Yeah, curiosity. I think curiosity is one of the most important things to have, actually.
I think so.
It's particularly when you get old. It's the people that give up being interested.
So being an actor is a cure also for restless souls like you. Were you always restless?
Yes, it's not a good... I don't recommend it. Because I'm only now, when I'm about to go, learning to enjoy things. I have the right to enjoy things. At the end of the war, my darling dad, we heard about Belsen and the camps, and people like us didn't know about that. I think some intellectuals and people that read the right papers did know that something like that was going on. But it was horrifying. And my dad sat me down and showed me pictures of what the troops were discovering in these camps. And he also showed me one picture, which I'll never forget, which was a picture of Mengele, the man who he was a man who did experiments on children and Romanians and anybody. And there's a picture of a little boy naked standing on a counter with Nazis in white coats pointing a stick at him, obviously saying, we're going to, I don't know, put an extra bone in his leg and see if it grows or whatever. And my dad told me about this, and I, as you can believe, I was 11 then, was horrified. And this was the phrase he used: this must never happen again, and it's down to you. Now that has guided my entire life. This must never happen again, and it's down to you. And I'm ashamed to say that I do say it a bit to my grandchildren. but it haunts you if you take it too seriously. And if it comes from such a horrific beginning, you know, a counsellor once told me that was an awful thing to say to you. That should never have been said to a child. And that's obviously what has made me want to put everything right.
Is that why you became a Quaker?
I think the pacifist thing was one of the things that led me, but it was also because there's nobody in charge. It's a society of friends, is what it's called, which is what it is. We all fight like mad, but it's run by everybody. I don't like being bossed around. I went to Catholic convents when I was little, so I do know my creed and my catechism, and I do know about hellfire, and that takes a long time to shake off, believe you me, as well. That's something that crops up and bites you every now and then.
So you think you believe in the innate, that there's a bit of God in everyone?
Yes.
And people are redeemable,
Yes.
even hardened criminals?
Absolutely, I believe that.
Do you? You don't believe in that some people are purely evil?
I don't think people were born evil.
Yeah.
I believe they start doing evil things very often because evil things have been done for them. I mean, most of the people in prison have been in care, or they've certainly come from cruel backgrounds. They've learnt to be cruel.
Yes.
And that is almost, for most of the really appalling crimes, that is true. And I do believe, my biggest belief is that there is what we say, that of God in everyone. And it just has to be found. I've done it time and time again with youngsters from bad backgrounds. And if you can find something that they do well and applaud them for it and praise them for it, they will grow from that.
So to become a Quaker, what do you have to do? How do you have to pass exams? Or
no, you have you what happens, you go as an attender for a long time to meetings, and anybody can drop into a meeting and they will all be very welcome, and they're quite puzzling because they're silent. It's an hour of silence,
gathered stillness, you said.
Exactly.
I love that idea.
It's not meditation, it is just being in a room with people, all of whom are looking for something. Some people would call it God, some people would call it the spirit, some people would just call it strength, but just one another's power. And sometimes it's just a meeting of an hour's silence and you think, when is this going to end? I mean, you think, oh, for God's sake, I can't sit here any longer.
But it's a great antidote to the restless actor.
It is. It's a very good discipline for me. And it's very good because if you're moved to speak, then that's what you do. You what we call minister. And then there's another silence and somebody else might follow that thing with a thought that brings up for them. Do you see what I mean? So the meeting has a sort of theme, but it's not a debate. It is what something inside you is telling you to say. And they have this book called Advice and Queries, which is such a wise book. It's all comments from Quakers right back to the beginnings in the 1600s. And it's full of the most amazing wisdom. And some of our phrases like live adventurously, consider the possibility that you may be wrong, is a very good one for me. I'm constantly saying that to myself. It's a wise religion.
And you say in Old Rage that the sort of best defence line against the sense of hopelessness that old age can bring, and also violence and war, is love. Love being what carries you on, what propels you forward, and what makes sense of...
Yes, love is a very loose word. Everybody talks about love, and I find I rather wither about that because it sounds sort of sentimental.
Well, you're not a sentimentalist, we know that, and you're not prone to nostalgia either. But
the most important thing is love. What does that mean? It means being generous to people.
Yes, exactly.
It means caring for people. Do you know what I mean? It's not just some lovely, warm, glowy thing that makes you happy. It's something much more profound than that. And sometimes it's bloody hard work.
Oh, God.
The
Marriage.
carers of this world.
Yes.
Which we were sort of talking about.
Well, you've had 2 marriages, and
yes.
you've been loved very much by your parents.
And I've had the privilege of loving.
Yes.
That is terribly important. Some people go through life because I get hundreds and hundreds of letters because of my books, particularly the one that I wrote about John and I. And I think there are a lot of people. I made a film called Edie, which is about a woman who climbed a mountain and who'd cared for a invalid husband for years and didn't like him, really didn't like him, had no love in her life. And then he dies and she has nothing. So she decides to climb a mountain. In the script, I was supposed to get on the top of the mountain, having achieved it, climbing, and it was hard work, and dance around and go, yes, I did it. And when I, in fact, got up there, I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it because it was
beauty.
Miles of nothing. It was, when you get to the top of this particular mountain, there's a loch that I rode across, and there's just no houses, no cars, no roads, nothing for miles. And I'd already had the experience of sort of the mountain helping me. I was quite scared sometimes because it was a difficult climb, and I was 80-something, they couldn't rope me because it showed on the thing. And the poor gilly that was looking after me was so frightened all the time that I was going to fall. But I leant against it, my front climbing. I can't explain to you. When you're climbing a rock face, your body is against the rock. And I began to sort of feel this rock helping me.
Yeah.
Helping me. It showed me bits that I could hang on to.
Yeah.
Crazy. But honestly, I began to think. So when I got to the top, I felt absolutely part of it. I can't explain it in any other way. People say that when they get to something like that, they feel tiny and nature and the size of nature and the mountains and this, that. I didn't feel that at all. I thought, this is me. I'm part of this. I'm nature. I'm part of this mountain. I'm standing on this earth. I'm looking, and the gilly pointed out that there was a black patch way down. And he said, that is from the beginning of the time. The geologists have proved that particular area is rock that was from the Big Bang. It went that far. And I mean, that's mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing. Feels like a bit like love, actually.
Unbelievable.
Doesn't that feel like love when you're up
there?
You
could call it love. You could call it love, but it was inexplicable. And I link it with the thing I had when I was young, with my best friend who's sadly died just recently. But she was evacuated as well, and I was evacuated, having a bloody awful time. And I don't know how, but for a week I got over to where she was staying, and I think her sisters must have picked me up from where I was or something. They had a car. Anyway, it was a place called Dancing Ledge, Langton Matravers. It was a little primitive cottage, and in those days it's now part of a big walk. Yeah, but then it was just rock and a pool, and you had to go down an iron ladder, which is still hanging there. The ladder that us tiny girls went down. They've made steps to go down now, but there was none of that. And we went down one night. Her sister let us go down. I think she probably was keeping an eye on us, was hidden in a hedge somewhere or something. And we went down the ladder, and there was this pool that some maniac schoolteacher many years ago had blown with dynamite a hole on the ledge that his school could swim in. So there was this natural swimming pool. And when it was a hot day, and the tide filled it up, and then the tide went out and splashed against the ledge, and the pool was warm. Anyway, Brenda and I, we went down, and we said, let's go in. And we took all our clothes off, nobody around, and it was dark. And we went in, and I remember floating on my back in this warm water, holding my friend's hand, looking at stars. And I was used to searchlights and bombs and flashing and God knows what else, but stars, and hearing the water bashing on the ledge. And again, a moment of total absorption in nature. We were part of it, and Brenda remembered it for the rest of her life. And she went to live in America eventually, and her son wrote me a letter saying that she died, and on her bedside was my books, where I have told this story of us having this extraordinary meeting.
When you have those moments, you go through your life trying to You can't make them happen, can you? They just do or they don't.
No, you can have it sort of with sex, but
definitely.
But it's carpe diem. You've got to allow them to happen. Allow them think, oh, this is a good moment. When I was Chancellor of Portsmouth University, at the parting speech, I always used to make the kids say, I am happy now, out loud, because they just got their degrees, they were there with their loved ones and everything. And I said, right, say now, out loud, I am happy now. And I said, that's got to be your motto for the rest of your life. Every now and then, mark a moment of happiness so that you don't miss it. Because I look back at my life and I think, God, that was a wonderful moment. And I would have been worrying about something. I know. I've got a picture of John and me having a picnic on the beach at Brighton. We loved picnics. And I know I would have been thinking, oh, God, I haven't bought anything for supper. Or, do you know what I mean? And it was a lovely moment. And John would have been enjoying it because he was good at that.
Yeah.
But I'm sure, worrying.
And do you worry less now that you're...
No, I still worry. I will look for things to worry about rather than to look for things to be delighted by. But I'm getting better. By the time I die, I might have cracked it. I might be on my deathbed saying, this is good. This is a good moment.
I think, well, you brought us neatly to the idea of death, which you say in older age is something that, you know, it's the biggest challenge of our lives. And you do confront your own mortality. So how do you feel about it? I mean, you're talking about how you're going to pack it all in the next 10 years. I think you give you another 10 years.
Panic is what I feel about doing all the things I want to do before I die. That's my main thing. I cherish life now. Yeah. And I don't want to lose it. And like everybody, I hope that I go peacefully. I'm actually a vice president of St. Christopher's Hospice. And so I'm very concerned about the end of life, that people should have an easy time. I think it'll be all right. You see, I've seen lots and lots of people die, and I've never seen people die in anguish.
So you feel okay about it, yeah?
It's always seemed very peaceful at the end. At the very end, people can be in pain, but we can usually do something about that, or breathless, or whatever. But I hope it's like going to sleep. I hope it'll be like that. And I'm curious to know what happens next. I really am quite curious. My mum, when right at the end of her life, I was nursing her, and she suddenly said, "No, Rick, I can't. I've got things to do. I can't come yet." As though she could see my father.
Goodness.
This was right at there, and she was quite firm. "No, Rick, I can't come now. I've got things to do." And I thought, she's really seeing him. She really is seeing him, because it did look as though she did. Now, it could have been a trick of the brain or whatever, but we don't know what happens, and that is quite interesting, isn't it?
It certainly is. I think there's a bit of a Buddhist in you, in your Quaker self. I also am so interested in the disconnect between your parents' world and you now and your grandchildren. You know, the subjects that were so taboo, nothing's taboo. We've just talked about death. That used to be such a taboo, didn't it? Sex was a taboo. We talk about that ad infinitum too much.
I think probably growing up in pubs changed me a bit. I wasn't quite so conventional, and my parents weren't quite so conventional. But certainly there were standards, and you didn't talk about death, and you didn't talk about illness. I suspect that my mother had rheumatoid, because she was always saying, "Oh, my rheumatism's playing up today." And I'm sure that nowadays she would, like me, have a weekly injection, and it would help her. But you didn't. You just didn't. My dad had TB, and
you didn't talk about it, did you? No.
Well, there was nothing you could do in those days.
I know, it's extraordinary that the changes and what we're prepared to talk about, mental health, and I suppose that's good.
Yes, it is good, I think. It is good. Although sometimes I wish it would all shut up. It's so difficult keeping up, isn't it? I mean, the gender thing, I desperately don't want to upset anybody, so I want to know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I want to use the right words, because words are important.
Yes.
But a male friend, gay friend of mine said, just if you're puzzled, call everybody by their name.
Yes. That's
one way around it. But if you're puzzled, just say, how do you want me to address you?
Yeah.
And then do that.
Yeah, and try and remember when you're...
Yes.
Yeah.
And try and cope with the grammar, because it's so complicated. But I do think it's important. I do think it's important, and I hate it when the government says that they don't recognise things. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about Quakers. Everybody is acceptable. Nobody. I mean, I've been in a Quaker meeting and some tramp has come in from the road and start burbling. No way would the Quakers ask him to leave. He sits the whole meeting just chatting to himself.
I love the sound of Quakerism more and more, I must say.
It's totally accepting. So all these things about gender just don't apply to Quakers. You can be absolutely what you like, as long as you accept that there's that of God in everyone.
Similarly, I mean, you say that, the world's divided between those who are natural fans and those who really are not impressed by anyone. And you fall into the second category. You're not a fan. You're not impressed by people's status, their titles.
I'm not, strangely enough.
The Queen, you love the Queen, but... since you wrote the book, The Queen's Died, how did you feel about that?
Oh, I was upset.
Yes.
I was doing a live show, and I went into the wings, and the girl said, something's happening with the Queen. I said, what do you mean? And then I had to go back on air, and then in the next break, they said, we think she may have died, so be careful what you're saying, don't be too jokey. And I went off, and I was crying, and this little girl said, why are you crying? She's an old lady. And I thought... That's the difference. She's my entire life.
Yeah.
She's been there as a little princess and right to the end. So there's no way that I can say at the moment that I want to get rid of royalty. I've reached the age where I no longer have to pretend I believe in things because it's proper. Do you know what I mean? I should, as a mainly left-wing person, I should believe in the abolition of royalty. I don't. I like them. I love ceremony. I love all the crownings. Yeah. I love all that like mad. And I'm very worried about the princess, and I'm worried about Charles. Because at the moment, as far as I'm concerned, King Charles, as he is now, is one of the supporters of the arts. We don't have any in government. He actually knows about music and knowledgeable. He's incredibly knowledgeable about the environment. Yeah. He's better than most of the politicians.
Absolutely.
So I don't want one of them in charge.
Ahead of his time. And as you have said many times, contradictions, so what? You can contradict yourself. It's great.
Absolutely.
Life is full of uncertainty, and certainty makes you nervous.
But it's having the courage to say, am I just believing that because I think I should?
Exactly.
That's really...
The knee-jerk reactions to exactly, virtue signaling.
You've got to be honest and then maybe talk about it to somebody who will put you right.
Well, I think also changing your mind is a good thing.
Right.
So closure and endings that we're talking about. Have you thought about exit lines or an epitaph?
Oh, thank God for that. No, I haven't.
It's possibly for someone else to think of an epitaph.
It probably will be, it's time to go, or something like that.
And what do you look forward to every day? What
gets you up in the morning? A drink in the evening.
A drink in the evening. Sheila, thank you so much. It's been such heaven talking to you. Thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure.
If you've enjoyed today's show, you can hear more episodes in the series by clicking follow wherever you're listening to this, or by searching for The Third Act on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube. And if you think your friends would love to listen, please do tell them about us. This episode was produced by Pete Norton and made possible by Orions, luxurious residences that are redefining later living in the heart of Chelsea. I'm Catherine Fairweather, and we'll be back in a fortnight for another episode of The Third Act.